Who are some of the top wings in the second round of mocks, and why do I believe these players can stick in the NBA? Find out coming up on Locked On NBA Big Board. What's up? My name is Richard Stayman. You might know me better as MavsDraft on Twitter, NBA Draft Film on Instagram. I do NBA draft scouting reports, high level, NBA level, as well as community mock drafts and big boards and things like that on my Substack, MavsDraft.substack.com. I appreciate everybody who continues to listen as we are 2 weeks away, just over 2 weeks away. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks exactly till the first round. Thursday of that week is the second round. Really appreciate everybody who continues to listen. It means a lot to us and continues to make us your first listen. Means a ton to us. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So I want to talk about some of the wings like I teased in the intro and the opener. There are a lot of good wings in this draft. Now, some of these guys are being mocked in the second round. Some of these guys you don't even see on mocks. You probably won't see Malavi Leons in the second round of any mock draft. But that's why I want to talk about them. I think there's some really fascinating wing depth of guys that may be rising, or that if they aren't rising, they're probably going to get a two-way, and you're going to be like, who is this? So that you have that information if you're watching this in 3 weeks. You have this information ahead of Summer League. Now you know. So let's start with the big one. I think the best name on this list is probably Kevin McCullar. You know, he's not my highest rated. I think by the consensus, McCullar is my top guy. So I'm going to go over each of these players and why I like and why I may dislike some of these guys. So I actually posted Kevin McCullar's scouting report today on my Substack, so check that out. A little bit of background on him. He transferred from Texas Tech. He blew out his leg as a junior in high school, so he's a little bit older. He's already 23, fifth-year player. His dad played in the NFL, played for the Green Bay Packers. He's had a lot of injuries in college. That's going to be one of the big themes that you're going to hear in this is he's often injured, and a lot of it's his lower body. Now, it's not necessarily, I think in the pre-draft process, things can change. It just might be a flag that drops your stock. I'm not going to read into it any further than just draft stock. But when he is healthy, I think he has a chance to be, if not the best defender in the class, among wings, right up there. I think Ryan Dunn probably has that on lock at this point, but McCullar is very close. He's a defensive captain. He really, really initiates the defense, if that makes sense, where he's telling everyone where to be. He's a pretty mistake-free player. Before this year, when he took the offensive leap, he was really, I think he was the best defender in the country. I know I thought for a while he may not even have been the best in the Big 12, but Micah Peavy would have been my answer. But McCullar, just watching him more and more in hindsight, I think it's very safely Kevin McCullar. So that's high praise, and that's also the best defensive conference. So if you're the best defensive player in the best defensive conference, it's easy to see why people like you as an NBA prospect. On top of that, he really improved this year. Just let me pull up the season stats from last year because I have this year's up. But so last year he averaged 10 points a game, 10.7. That was a season. That was a career best. 7 rebounds, also career best. 2.4 assists was second best of his career, and that was on his second best at the time, field goal percentage, 44. His freshman year in 18 minutes a game, he had 51% shooting, but it was pretty low volume. This year, everything improved. 18 points a game on 45% shooting, career best 33% from three. That's one of his red flags we'll get to, but shot 80% from the line on really good volume, 45% from the field, 6 rebounds a game, 4 assists, a steal and a half, almost a half block a game, struggled with some turnovers. He was the first option for Kansas, but he's not going to be the first option in the NBA. For me, that just says, hey, it's really good that he can do it. It speaks to the talent that he has, and it just says it pops. But in the NBA, that it's going to be, he probably plays in the same role he did a lot of times at Kansas, though, which is playing as that fifth option, playing in that corner, letting other guys go to work. He cuts behind the defense, or he spots up if that jump shot really does turn out to be real. I think he's an interesting offensive prospect because on defense, he checks out. Like, to me, that's the elite skill. You have to have an elite skill that gets you on the floor in the NBA, unless you have multiple very high level, but not quite elite skills. I think that's McCullar's calling card is defense. He's going to be out there every single possession playing hard on the defensive end. On the offensive end, there's not a ton, I think, right away. Jump shot's going to be the biggest question mark. Like I said, this is a career best in 5 years, 33% from the field. And that's including any small sample size. Even the year he took 1 3 a game, it was 28%. 3 of the 5 years, under 30% from 3. His junior years last year at Tech, 31% was his second best. This year on 4.5 attempts, 33%. I'm actually not mad with it, especially because every year since his sophomore year, his free throw percentage has gone up 70, 72, 76, 80.5. Like there's something very real going on there. Now he still has a hitch. I don't think that shot's getting fixed overnight, but there's some really good fits for him, I think, that could really use his defense. Now, before I get to some of his best fits, the concerns. So injury history, the shot, like I hinted at, I don't think he explodes to the rim. I don't think he's a very good on-ball slasher. I think he's a good cutter, but I don't think he's a good slasher. I don't think he has the right angles. He doesn't really explode, not great lift, things like that. And then also his body language at times, especially on the offensive end, were really rough. And in his 2 worst games that I watched, Cincinnati game was less so, but especially the Iowa State game, every little mistake, he went like 5 of 17 or 4 of 19 in both of those games. It was something pretty give or take to those. And in those games, it just did not look right. He was mad at every single thing. He was blaming everyone else for his woes. It seemed like he was really in his own head. He's got to cut that down because he's going to have bad nights in the NBA. And that's just part of the process. Now, how he chooses to handle that, the body language just has to get better. Now, some of the fits for McCullar, I think he could fit really well somewhere like Orlando. I don't think he goes to 18, but they do have a second round pick. In theory, they could take him in the second round. I'm not even going to hint at I'm not going to act like this is something that really could happen because the Magic historically just don't use the draft picks. Even though he may be there at 47, I just don't see it. If he is going to go first round, I think he's going to go past 20. You could put him on Phoenix. I think he really makes them a lot better. He addresses that defense, plays that role right away. I think his floor is almost like this. He's not the same player or the same caliber of defender, but he could be like the way Andre Roberson. Hey, it's okay if you're not playing much offense, especially in the regular season, you can make it work. Also, Milwaukee could use him. Teams like New York, I'm sure that fits the culture of that defense first. Put him in Washington. I'm just going down the list of teams in the 20s. Put him in Washington. That's a really good way to help build that defensive identity that Washington desperately needs, especially if they take, let's just say, Donovan Clingan at 2. That's a defensive draft right there to really make a long-term fix for the worst defense in the NBA right now. Minnesota could use him. I think he could learn a lot under Kyle Anderson. Denver, Utah, Boston. So you're seeing every single team could use him, right? But I do think the best one for me would be if Toronto took him at 31, the very first pick in the second round. I'd really like that. I think that would be a good pick. He's just somebody that I feel like has that elite role. How he gets used is really up to the team, but there is something to like there. So another guy I like is Jaylen Wells. Jaylen Wells, if you don't know who he is, he has a very interesting story coming from Washington State. Let me see what community college he played at, but he's a 5th-year guy. He generally didn't get any hype until the end of the season. Actually, excuse me, he's a 3rd-year guy. He went to Sonoma State is where he went to. Sorry for a long time pulling that one up. But basically the story with Jaylen Wells is he's a shooter that you would think this archetype gets a lot of love as a good rebounding wing. Not great, 4.5 rebounds, but he does go follow the ball, and get rebounds. There's a game against California where I remember a few times he snuck in between 2 defenders, 2 guys boxing out that just were blind to him, and he got the ball and got put back. Like that kind of stuff matters. Doesn't play make a ton. I'm not going to say he has a great handle. In fact, I'd say he doesn't really have much of a handle, but he has an argument to being one of the best shooters in the draft. The archetype, right? At 6'8", can shoot the lights out. What's there not to like? That I think is where a lot of teams. I know he didn't play well at the combine, but I feel like that archetype is going to draw a lot of teams. Now, he measured at the combine, just looking at it on Basketball Reference, he was listed at 6'8", 6'6.5", without shoes, 6'7" wingspan. So the wingspan does hurt him. Because of that, I do think he ends up going in the second round, maybe even undrafted. But look, sometimes it's just simple. Draft the tall shooter who has the great skill. Like I said, he's 6'7", 6'6", not that 6'8". Maybe that changes a little bit of his value, but he is one of the best shooters in the class. Like there's a very real argument. There are a lot of smart people on draft Twitter who also feel that he is one of the top shooters in the draft. And I think that generally draft Twitter is right on a lot of those things. So I really like his game. And also just shout out to his teammate, Isaac Jones, who has absolutely killed it in Portsmouth, the G League camp. And I can't remember actually if he was at the NBA Draft Combine, but I'm pretty sure he got the promotion too. That's just like he's had a great offseason. So, but yeah, with him, with Jaylen Wells, he's about to be 21, doesn't turn 21 until after the draft, third year, pretty young. I think there's a lot to like with him. He's another one of those sleeper guys that he can easily add value on offense, and depending on the team around him, he can add a ton of value on the defensive end too, just based on his size. So coming up, I'll also talk about David Jones, Jalen Bridges, Malavi Leons as well, some other sleepers. But first, let me tell you about FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, NHL Stanley Cup, and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 on bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from the Finals MVP. Maybe if you want to feel bold right now, as I'm recording this, the Mavs are down 2-0. The game is tomorrow. Maybe you could bet on Luka to win Finals MVP, or you can bet who's going to hit a home run, anything like that. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on the YouTube app or free Amazon Fire TV channels apps. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So again, my name is Richard Stayman. You probably know me better as Matt at MavsDraft. Apparently having trouble speaking today, but let's keep going over some of these wings. I was talked about Kevin McCullar and Jaylen Wells, touched on both of them for a little bit and why I think they do have value in the 20s for Kevin McCullar, even down to the 30s and 40s for both of these guys. Especially, I think once you get to 30s, any of these tall wings that have a great role, like Jaylen Wells has shooting, McCullar has defense plus other growth spurts in other areas. I think you have to invest in that in this kind of draft where you just are looking for somebody. So the next one that I'll talk about here, I'm interested in David Jones. I think he's a really fascinating player. Went from St. John's to, DePaul to St. John's. DePaul for 2 years, 1 year at St. John's, and then to Memphis. And this year in Memphis, everything came together. He stopped gambling as much as he did in other stops. It still wasn't not an issue. He really shot the ball better. This was his career best, 46% from the field, went 38, 44, 39, 46. The three ball really fell. This is the first year over 30%. Before it was 7% as a freshman in 1.5 games, 30% back-to-back years, and then 38%. Now, the difference is over the last 2 years, the free throw percentage is really sharp. He took 83 free throws in his first 2 years, took almost 300 in the last two. So that sample size of him shooting 78 and 80% seems pretty real. His shot's really pretty. I saw him at the combine play in the scrimmage. Didn't measure super well. 6'4", 6'7" wingspan's not ideal for a wing, especially because he is a true wing. He's not a point guard. He doesn't see the floor super well. I would say some of those, he's not like the fact that he is not a point guard is really bad. He doesn't get great lifts on drives. Like that's one of those flags I think you look for in a 3-level scorer, even though he does have that 3-level scoring ability. He needs to be more defensively disciplined. Excuse me. Like I said, I'm for whatever reason having a hard time talking today, but I think with him, he gambled a lot at St. John's and especially DePaul. He got better at it this year, though. I think he was more controlled and more calculated in doing it. Not to say he wasn't like he was disciplined, but it did get better. Also on offense, I don't think he moves very much off ball. Like when he knows that play is not calling for him, like he's out of the play entirely. Also, defensive intensity can be a little bit poor when he's running defending guys running off of screens. He's quick to give up. And because of that, that's the intel I've heard is that there's some accountability issues. Now, I will say the thing with intel that I have learned over the years, there are long-term intel things and there are things that could very well be pinned to one just unlucky night. For example, what if the stuff I heard came from one of his worst games where he was having a really bad game and he didn't want to talk to anybody and, he didn't own it, but maybe the next day he owns it, still gets labeled as accountability concerns. But I think this is one of those instances where on the court it kind of does match. There's that body language really does look like somebody who may at times not be the most accountable. And that's where I think him being a point guard, it kind of goes hand in hand, where it's like he's not looking out for everybody at all times. A lot of times it felt like he was just looking out for himself. If you just listen to some of those negatives, you can add that up. Now, again, though, I've heard bad things about some players like Gigi Jackson, the same thing, and you wouldn't hear that now. Like, it just really depends on the context of those intel, almost rumors, but I feel like that one is important to share. I'd say the big strengths, though, I'm not going to leave here and just talk about his negatives. One, look, he may not be the most disciplined, but he forces turnovers. You don't average 2 steals a game by accident. He really plays the passing lanes well. I think he can generally play defense if he's committed. He has a quick first steps that makes it easy to blow by defenders. His up fake. If you remember last year, I raved about Serge Jabari Smith all the time and how he still has the single best pump fake I've ever evaluated. David Jones is not far behind. Like, he has it and then he explodes. And that is why he's such a good 3-level scoring candidate, is because you get beat on the fake, he can go anywhere. He can pull up very easily. He can get to the rim. He can step back. That right there is 3 levels of scoring. So I really like that. He also rebounds the ball well. And just in general, that jump shooting uptick, I think that's real. That's something that it matters. Now, with David Jones, he's going to be 23 towards the end of the year around Thanksgiving. Because of that, he really has to address the accountability issues. If that doesn't get addressed, and if that does end up being real, he's going to have a hard time sticking in the NBA. I expect him fully to go to the G League right away, but I could see him being picked in the second round. I mean, really, once you get to 45, teams are just selling their picks. So, like, ignore, like, for me, this is just a minor pet peeve for, like, side tangent. Okay, Orlando has a 47th pick. 2 things. If you follow me at any point, this is not your first episode. If it is, I'll just explain. I am a Magic fan. I grew up one. I'm from Orlando. Even though I'm MavsDraft, I live in Dallas for the next week. And I grew up a Magic fan. I used to be Mavs Magic Draft, whatever, all that stuff. The Magic do not keep a second round pick. They never do. The most recent, I don't know the most recent one they took. I think it was Caleb Houston, probably, if I had to guess without looking at it. But, like, you can count on one hand how many they've actually used and kept a roster spot for. Like, one of the most infamous ones is in 2018. They took Justin Jackson, and not that Justin Jackson from North Carolina, the one from Maryland who never played in a game. And the pick that they traded to get him ended up being Jared Vanderbilt. I remember I was very upset at the time. But they also, like, another one they took was Wes Iwundu. It's just very rare that they use these. So when people say, oh, well, Orlando wouldn't take him at 47, once you hit 45, I would say just stop caring about who the pick is and who the team is. You're assigning the slot, because for all we know, I mean, Brooklyn could trade in for him, right? And right now, I don't think Brooklyn has any picks. So they, it's just with that stuff, like, it's nitpicking, I know. But I would say just kind of keep that in mind. But that being said, now a team that does need an upside player that could just fill out the end of their bench, why not? Why not take David Jones? I think he's somebody, if they like the interviews and they like their interactions with him, I think he's a really good value play in the 40s and 50s. Just that talent, that 3-level scoring, the ability to potentially scale up and play defense. That is the big question mark, is will he be locked in? If he's locked in, I think you get yourself an absolute steal in the 40s and 50s, somebody who could ultimately be a fringe rotation player in this kind of draft at the back end of the second half of the draft, of the second round, that's a win. So I really like him. I'm going to talk about Jaylen Bridges, who is my top player on this list, and the Malavi Leons to close this out. But first, let me tell you about BetterHelp. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to somebody who's unbiased on your life. For example, I could tell you how I truly feel about the anxiety that draft night gives me, right? But sometimes that's not all that's on somebody's mind, and you need an unbiased audience all the same. Therapy can be different for everybody. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team or our favorite sports drama. And it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, last segment here. Let's talk about Jaylen Bridges and Malavi Leons. I'm gonna start with Malavi because I think this is going to be a much quicker one. But Malavi is somebody who I had heard the name because the Missouri Valley Conference plays their conference tournament very beginning. They're one of the first teams to always go in March Madness. If I'm not mistaken, they actually might be the very first bid given out. This year, the Missouri Valley Conference is very good. Drake was in it. They made the tournament. They ended up beating out Indiana State, who should have been in it. And if I'm not mistaken, they won the NIT or they went. I can't remember if them or Seton Hall. My memory is a little bit hazy at this point about the NIT. But Bradley was that third team in the Missouri Valley Conference. They went 23-12, and they were led by Malevy Leons, as well as a 5'8" guard, Duke Dean, who, if you haven't seen him, he's pretty good, but not an NBA player. Again, 5'8". Malevy, though, is really interesting. I saw him at Portsmouth. I'm going to try and see if I can pull up his measurements, but I'll tell you in the meantime while I'm looking for that. But with Malevy, I saw him at Portsmouth and didn't think he was anything. I kind of thought, okay, like he's just a big wing. He'll probably play in Europe. But everything I'm starting to see more of him is, how is this guy not an NBA prospect? So I found the measurements. With shoes, he's 6'10" as a wing. Let that sink in. 7.5 foot wingspan, pretty big hands, 200 pounds. So needs to add a little bit more weight if he's going to play probably that true power forward role, but he's probably end up leaning towards a wing and small forward. With Malevy, what really stood out to me was just his ability to make plays at all ends. Like I thought he was just an off-ball player who lights out defender, one of the top defenders in the class as well. But he was so much more than that. He was a play finisher who did everything well. He's not much of a creator. He had some nice plays in isolation throughout the year, but he's not a self-creator. I would not label that in the NBA, going from Missouri Valley Conference to the NBA. And also just a quick background, he's a Dutch player who came over to Bradley a little late in his career. He played at community college in Missouri, so he's from that area. But with him, he's the two-time Missouri Valley Defensive Player of the Year, all-defense member, was on all Missouri Valley Conference 2 of the 3 years there. And at Portsmouth, he really showed out. He didn't look overmatched. I really am still shocked he did not get an invite to the G League Elite Camp for the year. He shot, I'll just read his whole stat line, but 13 points per game, or really 14 rounding up, 7 rebounds, a good rebounder, 1.3 assists, 1.5 steal, 1.5 blocks. And on the wings, if you're getting 1.5 steal and 1.5 block, you're an analytical darling. So that should be raising green flags all over the NBA. Then he shot 49% from the field, 34 from 3, 78 from free throw line. And just for reference, if you're not bought in to the shooting on the 34, 38% from 3, all on pretty much the same volume, 38% in his junior year, 35% in his fourth year, which is like with new COVID stuff, but like the extra year this year, 34% is his true senior year. The free throw percentage, 83% on 2.5 is junior year. Fourth year, 78% on 3 attempts per game, 78 again on 4.5 this year. So like that shot is real. And from what I've heard, that shot has gotten better, and that he's had in his pro day in LA, he had a very strong shooting game day that caught eyes. I think he's somebody worth investing in. Just he made plays. He didn't look overmatched in Portsmouth against guys that really should have been better than him. Just on paper, I really didn't think he had any business doing it, but he showed out. And you know what? That was a mistake on my end from a couple months ago. Now I view him as a top 75 player. I think when you look at him, you kind of have to think almost the way Dexter Dennis was last year, if you remember him from Texas A&M, another guy I was very high on, where it's that very plain sight defense is there. Jump shot indicators, is the jump shot there yet? We'll see. But very athletic. I think he's somebody that could stick out. And then lastly, I've got Jaylen Bridges. Jaylen Bridges is one of my absolute favorite players in this draft. I didn't like him much in the previous years when he was at West Virginia or Baylor, even last year. Something clicked this year, and it's probably the fact that he raised his three-point percentage 10 points. And it's not that much of a fluke, I don't think, because, again, just kind of reading the stats, 41% as a sophomore from 3, or really redshirt freshman, went 32.5 for the next 2 years at Baylor and West Virginia, and then 41%. And that was on the most attempts. And the other thing is the free throw percentage, career 80%. That wasn't a fluke. It's a very quick release. It's extremely hard to block. I just feel like he's somebody that is going to stick in the NBA, because when you get these big guys that can simply shoot, when they're 6'7", 6'8", whatever you are, they don't grow on trees. So generally these guys stick because they know there's value. Yeah, he's 23 years old, whatever. That doesn't really bother me. I think he has great upside coming off of screens, something he really didn't do. I think as he improves his shooting base, that's going to be something that we'll see as a hidden kind of element to his game. He moves really well off ball. One of the best standstill shooters I've seen this year. Just completely effortless release. Again, closeouts don't get him. There's a play I posted online if you search MavsDraft Bridges of him just shooting over this Dylan Mitchell contest that looks like it should have been blocked for like very easily, and he gets it over him. It's that level of quickness. He plays the passing lanes well. I don't think he's a great defender by any means, but that can be negated by the fact that he doesn't make mistakes. He just doesn't force bad plays. He has a good motor. He rebounds well. The handle's really rough. I don't know if he can attack closeouts even super well right now, but I think that can come as he fixes some of the other elements of his games and honestly just more reps going against closeouts. I think that'll help him. He's a little bit stiff. Didn't get to the line a ton. And then also, like I said, just the defensive concerns. And also kind of athletic. I didn't really get blown away by that. But when you look at Jaylen Bridges, I think he's somebody that if you put him on the absolute right team, I personally have number 20 on my board. I think when you're looking at the top 20 player in this draft, because generally 20 players stick 20 to 25 in a decent to good draft, Jaylen Bridges sticks in my mind. Like I said, if you're tall and you can shoot and you shoot that well and you can do other things at minor levels to make your teammates better, you stick. Right now, let's see, like just on consensus mocks, he's at the very end. I mean, on Tankathons, he's at 58. He's the last pick of the draft. I think he should be closer to the first round, just going through the teams. The New York Knicks could absolutely use him. The Milwaukee Bucks could absolutely use him. Phoenix could. You also have the Pelicans, even just in the 30s. The Pacers could use him. Portland could use him as a rebuilding team to help their guards like Scoot. The Utah Jazz can use him. There's just a universal fit in the NBA for guys like Jaylen Bridges. And I really do think that those kind of players have value, especially in the second round. I think he'll be there in the second round. He should be a priority pick in the 30s. I don't think he should settle for a two-way personally. I do think he should be out there getting guaranteed money. We're going to see him kill it in summer league and go, how did we let this guy's, how did like nobody scout this guy's top 30 prospect? That's my prediction. I think Jaylen Bridges is one of the top bets. On this episode, though, I covered, like I said, Jaylen Bridges going in reverse order. I just finished up Malavi Leons as well. Jaylen Wells, David Jones, and Kevin McCullar. All of them have great value in the second round, and that's probably where they'll end up. Some of them may be undrafted, but again, revisit this in summer league when your team signs that player and come back. We really appreciate it, though. I really appreciate it, I guess, because I'm alone today. We'll be back later this week. Leif is back from Europe. James will be here, and I'll be here. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you listening to Locked On NBA Big Board.